This is Heidi. Welcome back to my channel, My Reading Life. I'm doing a Friday Reads video because it's been like almost 2 weeks since I've checked in with any of my reading. I have a bunch of books to go through here. I haven't been completing a whole lot, but I've been reading a whole lot. So let's just get to it so this video isn't like super long. The first book I want to talk about is one that I've brought up in a couple of my recent videos, and that is 1984 by George Orwell. This is a modern classic that is startlingly appropriate to today's culture and climate. And I read this for Mel's read-a-thon Gone with the Book, which was the last week of September. I finished it up right at the end of the month or the beginning of October. I think I read this when I was younger, but I didn't really remember anything, so it was almost like reading it for the first time, if not exactly like reading it for the first time. It was a good book. It's, the writing style is very engaging. It is really disturbing, though, because it is so much like what is happening with authoritarian governments and even with the tendency towards very conservative right-wing politics in democracies these days. So I've marked a few passages, and I just thought I'd read a passage here so you can see how startlingly similar this is to today's climate. So this is talking about the political system in this fictional dystopia. But since in reality, Big Brother is not omnipotent, and the party is not infallible, there is a need for unwearying, moment-to-moment flexibility in the treatment of facts. The key word here is black-white. Like so many newspeak words, this word has two mutually contradictory meanings. Applied to an opponent, it means the habit of impudently claiming that black is white in contradiction of the plain facts. Applied to a party member, it means a loyal willingness to say that black is white when party discipline demands this. But it means also the ability to believe that black is white, and more, to know that black is white, and to forget that one has ever believed the contrary. This demands a continuous alteration of the past, made possible by the system of thought, which really embraces all the rest, and which is known in newspeak as doublethink. So, as you are well aware, 1984 has coined a lot of vocabulary that we use today, which some of it was brought out in that passage, and it's just really disturbing to see that some things never change, and in fact we just continue to repeat things over and over again. But highly recommended if you have not yet read 1984. The other book that I finished was an audiobook called The City of Brass by author S.A. Chakraborty. This is a fantasy novel that I buddy read with Lindsay. It is the first in a trilogy. I really enjoyed it. I think I enjoyed it more than Lindsay did. It had the slow start, as fantasy books often will when they're the first in the trilogy and they're setting up the world and you're learning all the characters' names and you're learning all the political systems and all of that. And it can be very confusing, especially in this book, especially for Western readers with this book, because this fantasy is based on sort of Middle Eastern fables and legends. Our main characters are magical beings, which we would call jinn, and we're learning about their basically world and their society. So there's a lot there to sort of get used to. We're following three main characters, and each chapter is told from the point of view of two of the three main characters. The first main character is Nari, who is a young girl who is basically a con artist in Cairo, and she's sort of the hero of the story so far, at least from where we are now in book one of the fantasy series. She inadvertently calls a jinn warrior to her, and he has to basically rescue her from some Ifrit demon type creatures. And so they're on the run, running away from these Ifrits. And Dara, the Jinn, is taking her to the place that he thinks she'll be safe, which is the Jinn city, City of Brass. And our other main point of view character is Ali, who is living in the City of Brass. He is a prince of the ruling family, and he is sort of like been trained as a soldier in this society. And so these three main characters basically are who we're seeing the story from their perspectives. And it's quite action-packed, especially at the end of the story. It sort of ended in a cliffhanger, which fantasy novels are wont to do in order to get you excited about the next book in the series. And Lindsay and I do plan to continue on with the series probably after the first of the year in anticipation of book 3 coming out in the spring. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was quite refreshing and quite a different take on a fantasy world, and I, for the most part, enjoyed it, although I had a few quibbles with just a few items within the story, which I don't really want to get into because I don't want to spoil anything. But for the most part, I found it very enjoyable, and I would recommend it. The last book I've completed so far in the last little while is a romance novel, The Wallflower Wager by Tessa. That was another buddy read that I did with Doris and Katie. And this book is basically telling the story of a spinster who takes in unwanted and injured animals, and a wealthy businessman moves in next door to her in London, and they sort of form this alliance of sorts. There's she has to meet some of the demands of some family members, and he's determined to help her do that because he wants to sell this house that's next door to hers for a lot of money, and he thinks his house is worth more with an eligible lady of the ton in that house. So they form an alliance and, of course, fall in love in the meantime. It's quite delightful. There's lots of amusing scenes involving animals. One with a goat giving birth that was particularly amusing and fun. And I will also note that while this book seems quite madcap and silly in the beginning, it addresses some very serious topics by the end of the story. So I think, I really liked the mixture of sort of fun silliness with serious topics, handled in a very unusual way, I felt, for a romance novel. Loved the main characters. And I would recommend that as well. Listen to that one on audio too. So what am I currently reading? I'm currently listening to On Fire by Naomi Klein. This is a nonfiction book. It's a collection of essays from Naomi Klein that she's written over, say, the past decade about climate change and what really needs to happen in society in order to address climate change. I really have found Naomi Klein's previous books, which I cannot remember for the life of me what the name of the last one I read is. I'll try to remember to stick it up here so you can see it. She just writes really well about climate change. She confronts a lot of issues head on that a lot of people, even people that believe in climate change, are afraid to deal with, especially about how basically our culture and our lifestyles in Western industrialized nations are going to have to change in order to meet the demands of addressing climate change issues. And that we have got to acknowledge, those of us that live in these Western industrialized nations, that we have used up we've used up far more than our fair share of natural resources, leaving lots of other folks all around the world with less because of what we've used, and we're going to have to address that at some point. So I'm about 30% of the way into On Fire, and really again, can't really say I'm enjoying it. It's really distressing, a lot of it, but I am also finding it very informative. And if you're interested in writing and more information on climate change, I cannot recommend Naomi Klein highly enough. For Victober, I am currently reading North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. Last year, I read Wives and Daughters as part of Victober, and so I've been waiting all year to pick up North and South because I wanted to read more Elizabeth Gaskell. I'm only about 10 chapters in, so it's really just still setting up the story, but very much enjoying revisiting Elizabeth Gaskell, just as an excellent writer of Victorian literature so far. I'm also buddy reading Macbeth by Shakespeare with Emily, and both Emily and I are doing a text audio combination to consume this book. I think Emily's already read Macbeth before. I had never read Macbeth, so we're listening to the full cast audio while we read the text, and we're just doing an act or two a week, and that is really fun to read in October with all the witches and all the machinations that are going on, so it's a great October read. I am reading another nonfiction. This is Underland, A Deep Time Journey by Robert Macfarlane. This book has been showing up on a few booktubers channels. I was particularly inspired to pick this up at this current time because of Amy Anders, and she recently talked about this book in one of her recent videos, and the way that she described it just made me want to pick it up immediately. Luckily, my library had a copy the last time I was in there, and I am well over halfway through this. It's basically each chapter is like its own essay about places under the earth. And so the author is quite an adventurous soul, and he goes along with different people as they do things under the earth, whether it's extreme cavers or it's mining operations or it's folks that explore the tunnels under Paris. I'm currently in a chapter about a man who is an activist in protecting the cod fishing grounds in the northern oceans above Norway, the islands and the deep sea trenches around northern Norway, and it's just amazing nature writing, just beautiful passages. There's a passage in here about the author in the wintertime hiking to this remote cave system in Norway where it's like completely wild. It's very inaccessible, and in these like seaside cave systems are prehistoric paintings made by people like tens of thousands of years ago. And the way that the author describes that encounter with that art in that place was so spiritual and like just really deeply touching. I am not at all a religious person. If anybody knew me in real life, they'd be like, wow, that's kind of strange. But to me, the writing in this book is highly spiritual and very touching and emotional. And I'm really getting a lot of this. I didn't know if I'd really be interested. I have never really particularly been interested in sort of under the earth systems or how geologic features work. That's really not my thing. I'm more into the natural sciences, but this author brings it to life and really evokes emotional responses. As in some of the sections where he's talking about working his way through these cave systems, a sense of claustrophobia is like overwhelming. So highly recommend this. If you like nature writing at all, I would ask you to try this book because I think it's really fabulous. Another chunker that I've started, and I don't have the cover on this book, but is The Outsiders by Stephen King. This is my spooky read for the month. I'm only about 50 pages into it. So what's happening in The Outsider is that a high school not high school, I'm sorry, like a little league baseball coach has been accused of a horrific sexual assault and murder of a young boy in the community. And this is taking place, I think, in a small town, New Hampshire or Vermont community. I can't remember exactly. One of those northeastern states. And there seems to be hard evidence against this man. So the police sort of rush out and arrest him. But evidently, maybe the case isn't so airtight. But like I said, I'm only 50 pages into it, and it's good so far. It's written right now as a lot of police reports and sort of witness reports that are being interspersed among the narrative, and I really enjoy that style of writing. And then the last major thing that I'm reading is, woohoo, Ducks Newburyport by Lucy Ellmann. I am buddy reading this with Doris and Will, and I have to thank Doris because she found a copy, an extra copy of this book in a bookstore down in Tennessee and mailed it to me so that I would actually be able to get a copy, because it's been, as you guys all know, I don't have bookstores really around me, and Amazon was, back ordered of like 2 months or something on this book. So super excited to have this in hand. I have read the first 266 pages, or 265 pages of this. It is, as everybody knows, a stream of consciousness from an Ohio housewife as she sort of ruminates on her life and goes about her day. And I am loving it. I'm finding it extremely humorous, extremely topical. I have been amazed at how many sort of passages are things that I have thought myself. I strongly relate to this narrator, for better or worse. And really, I was worried. I didn't know if I would enjoy this, because other books that I've read that are stream of consciousness I've really struggled with. But I do not find this difficult to read at all. I'm finding it very easy to read and very enjoyable to read. So hopefully that will continue, because, yeah, I have a long way still to go on that one. So anyway, that is what I have recently read and what I am currently reading, and all in a Friday Reads. I'm not planning on starting anything new this weekend. I just want to continue on with what I'm currently reading and hopefully catch up with some of that by the end of the weekend. It is a long weekend, woohoo! So I do have an extra day off this weekend for Indigenous Peoples Day on Monday, and I am looking forward to getting some reading done. I hope you are all doing well and that you're finding some great books to read as well. I'll talk to you later.